Thank you so much for joining us. I'm delighted to welcome you all here today. We're thrilled to be kicking off the 70th edition of the Winter Show with what's better than a panel discussion on Americana and collecting Americana. So before I turn it over to Ellen McGauley, who is the executive editor of Veranda magazine and will be our moderator today, I just would like to say your presence here means a lot to both Winter Show, but also to Eastside House Summerlin, which is the organization that both owns and supports the fair. So by being here, you're directly supporting all the tremendous work that Eastside House does each and every day to transform the lives of over 15,000 individuals in the South Bronx and northern Manhattan. So a round of applause to you all as well. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to our fabulous panelists.
Thank you, Helen. And thank you also for your entire team and everyone who makes this magic here. I know that you've already been in there and you've seen what's going on. It's another great show. I just want to say how proud we are at Veranda to be a part of this. We're based down in Birmingham, and if it tells you anything, I had to come north to warm up. I left at Birmingham, Alabama at it was 13 degrees when I came up here, so it's balmy. It's really just lovely. And I'm so happy to be here, and I'm kind of nuts about this topic. Americana is now. Mostly because after talking with the panelists and learning from them that we have up here today, I kind of internally started thinking of it as Americana is joy, because when you hear them talk about it and you hear a bit more, we're going to define it we're going to really dig into it, we realize that American antiques are storytelling, and who could resist a good story? So it's, as we were talking, I just kind of felt like it's this beautiful thing that emerges sort of like chipping away at a fossil. And so, none of us can resist a good story. So enough preamble. I'm going to welcome our panelists. All of them are archaeologists and hunters and gatherers and storytellers. Okay, now I'm going to change this order here because now I'm adjusting to where everyone's sitting. So anyway, this is collector Joe Gromacki at my right here. Elizabeth Lawrence, who's an interior designer. Stephen Spandle, who's a classical architect and collector. And we have dealer Frank Levy, who is out here. He's a vendor here, and you're at E1, right? Just throwing that out there. And so we're going to start, I think, by giving you a sense of, what their stories are. And Joe, I'm going to start with you. Ever since you showed me a picture of your colonial salt box house, I've had it sort of ingrained in my mind. It's in Wisconsin, and it's just the most amazing thing you've ever seen. But your collections, your focus is 17th and early 18th century American antiques. And you've lent your expertise to a number of boards, including the Terra Foundation, Historic Deerfield. How did all this start for you? You were exposed at a pretty young age to this wonderful world.
Thank you. And I'll just say it's a great pleasure to be here. Happy Americana Week to everybody. So I grew up in Milwaukee, and many of you may think, wow, Milwaukee, Americana, how did that happen? But actually, there were a small group of very active collectors of 17th and 18th century American furniture and related decorative arts in and around Milwaukee. And I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family that was really interested in this area. My family, many generations ago, formed an art collection, which is now at the Milwaukee Art Museum. And I grew up in a family then who really appreciated art and history. And I met and got to know a lot of collectors and really sort of grew up loving this area. And
this is as a child, how old are we talking here when you were hanging with these?
From the time I was a youngster, 5 or 6 years old, I was exposed to people who really appreciated history and appreciated art and saw those worlds coming together in a way that could really enrich one's experience. And so for me, it was a lot of fun, and it feels I feel very much at home with objects that represent the greatest achievements of American artistry.
I got chills there because I'm also picturing you. I mean, you sort of metaphorically, it's off of the shelf. It is all around you the way you live, Yeah.
Yes. So Ellen mentioned I have a weekend house. I actually live primarily in Chicago in the Gold Coast neighborhood. But I have a farm that is about a little over 2 hours outside Chicago, and the house on that farm was originally built near Deerfield, Massachusetts in 1740. And it was very carefully dismantled, moved, and reconstructed on this site about 75 years ago. And since I acquired it now, going on 25 years ago, I have installed my collection of American furniture and ceramics, textiles, and other paintings and other material there. And I've also developed really extensive gardens that have over 2,000 species of plants, all of which predate 1750. And we also raise heritage livestock. And so we really celebrate the early part of this nation's history. And I have a lot of fun doing it.
Told you joy in Americana. This is great. And I will be calling you as we have an issue coming up where that's going to come in handy, those plants. Elizabeth Lawrence, you're a partner with Bunny Williams at the venerable design firm Williams Lawrence, where your selection and integration of American antiques with pieces from around the world is its own art form. But you grew up antiquing alongside your mother, right?
Yes. So my mother took us antiquing, and my sister and I often said that she gave us what we called the linen lectures. It was, these are the linens you will need to run a beautiful home, and this is how you will need to take care of them. My sister and I often rolled our eyes at her. But now I am a tabletop enthusiast. I love to set a table. I love my linens. It is what I collect, silver, porcelain. But she was really the one that brought me into this and showed me what beautiful furniture is and the patina of it and the stories of it. And I have pieces from her and my grandparents. And, it's really what got me started down this road.
Could you recreate like a linen lecture? I mean, I'm not asking you to do it now. But I love this idea.
I probably could. And I'm sure my daughter will be rolling her eyes at me one day. But it was, it's funny because, fast forward and my mother looks at me now and goes, "Oh, really? How many tablecloths are in this closet?" And so it's kind of funny.
Oh, I love that. Okay, great. Okay, Stephen, architect and collector in your own right, Stephen Spandle. Your collection includes all manner of fine and decorative art, but you have a special love of all things Philadelphia, especially 18th century furniture, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so how did that start? Am I right thinking it started with a painting? No.
Well, one of my first serious American pieces was a painting, but really, I grew up on a farm in South Georgia. I was not necessarily exposed to a great deal of antiques, but I did love historic houses, and my parents were wonderful about taking me to house museums. And that is really where I was exposed to the relationship of architecture and the decorative arts that live within it, and how they're linked together and form a cohesive whole that makes a beautiful home for someone. And that was really where my passion began. And then over the years, I just started collecting things I thought were beautiful, and then started honing my focus and really loved Philadelphia items. And it was an American painting by Russell Smith that was one of my first pieces that I bought that sort of turned me from buying things that were English as well to really purely an American focus.
That was a significant purchase for you, like in those early days. Yeah. Yeah. And you can remember that piece.
Yes.
So, yes. Do you still have it?
Oh, yes.
All right. Okay, good. Frank Levy of Levy Galleries, we are deep in your DNA here. You acquire and sell some of the finest examples of early American craftsmanship in the country, landing in places such as the Met and the White House. Your great-grandfather was in the business, as many people might know, but for those of you who don't, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Let me first just say I'm sorry about my voice. Talking all night last night, it's a little shot, but
You can tell we have a vendor up here then, yeah.
That's right, a hawker. My great-grandfather started the business with his brother-in-law, John Ginsberg. That was the firm of Ginsberg and Levy. They were in business together the business stayed together from 1901 to 1973 when there was a split, and the Levy side stayed doing it, as did the Ginsberg side. And my great-grandfather started in 1901, and the story always was that my great-grandfather kept loaning money to John Ginsberg, who was buying things, and he finally said, forget it, we're partners now. In 2001, we did research, because that was our 100th anniversary. It turned out to be the exact opposite. My great-grandfather was one who was buying things and had no money, and it was John Ginsberg who helped him out. So the more you know. And we've been sort of doing this for almost 123 years.
Did you know you were going to step right into this?
I didn't. And I up until I was 54, I thought I was going to be a baseball player. But I had the advantage of being around these things for my whole life. And at first it just was what I knew and what I was around. I also learned that they were heavy because I was always asked to help move things and carry things. But as I got older and got more into American history, it became very clear to me that the tie-in between history and these objects was a real draw. And I was fortunate enough to go to the literature program in early American culture, and I see some of the people from there. And that was a place that the love of the objects came in. I mean, if you go to literature, and if you can't fall in love with the objects, you're in the wrong place. You're in the wrong field, because that is just an absolutely incredible collection. And I was fortunate enough to be around some very incredible people who taught, who I learned from, and who have become colleagues and friends.
Well, I may stay with you for a moment, because if you remember, when we started talking about this topic, Helen had said it's Americana is now, and I thought, okay, great. And I had this idea in my mind, and I saw, a lot of Windsor chairs, and I saw a lot of quilts, and, artwork of the American West, and certainly the Philadelphia formality. But I said, let's define this. What are we talking about when we talk about Americana, just to make sure we're speaking the same language, and we weren't. And their language is much better than mine. So, Frank, I'm going to stay with you on that. What you said to me, what is Americana? You broaden that out. It's about the American way of life, right?
I think anything that was used in an American home, from the earliest time, from 1660, things that survive, to 1840, what I would consider Americana. That includes furniture, that includes pottery, porcelain, all sorts of ceramics, needlework, textiles, metals, both silver, gold, brass, any of those things, iron, all part of the Americana world, even if they're not made here.
That's what was interesting to me too. Yeah.
People don't realize how tied in we were to the international economy. So that you have things coming in. The brasses on a piece of furniture are 99% of the time from England. The wood on a piece of furniture, particularly the hardwoods, the mahoganies, they're coming up from the tropics. We are part of a huge international economy, even in the 18th century, and that finds itself in the furniture.
Yeah. Joe, you said similar about that. These are the things that shaped our destinies, but they also are things that were, very clearly Dutch. You were talking about the things that are coming, to the East Coast. Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Sure. So I can build on that sort of global economy of the 17th and 18th centuries. So in the area of furniture, I collect primarily exclusively American-made furniture, things that were made in the upper and middle colonies in the 17th and early 18th centuries. However, In ceramics, I collect things that were used in America. And I look to archaeology at various early settlement sites up and down the eastern seaboard to provide guidance for my collecting. So what's really interesting is during the first 3/4 of the 17th century, America was tied into this complex system of global trade routes that were bringing materials from very faraway places to the American colonies. And so if you look at the archaeological excavations that take place at a place like Jamestown, the first permanent American settlement, you'll find that ceramics were coming from China, from Italy, from France, from Germany, from obviously England and Holland. Those were important sources of material, but they were coming really from all over the world. Even things from Mexico were making their way to the early colonial settlements. And it really was not until the British adopted and started really enforcing the Navigation Acts, which occurs in about the 3rd quarter of the 17th century, that trade began being more limited to English and Dutch material, because the laws then required that materials coming to the colonies either be made in England or come through an English port. So if you look at the period before that, it's this incredible diversity of material. And that's why I think when I think of Americana, I think of it more broadly than simply things that were made here, because really, as everybody's aware, America is the world's great mixing pot. People from so many different cultures came here, including early in our history, and they contributed to creating an American system of values and really a spirit that I think reflects a lot of different influences, and I find that really interesting.
And certainly informed all the pieces that were made here after that, so then that's all kind of in that language now. And Elizabeth, for you, American antiques are what helps establish a sense of belonging to a house that you might be designing. It sort of grounds it, and it might be like the regional vernacular. Talk a little bit about how you use them.
We did a project in Maine for a family that had a long history there, and it was a young family of 5 young children. We used a lot of antique hooked rugs, but we also used reproduction hooked rugs, copied from American designs, because our rooms nowadays are a little bit bigger, and some of the rugs didn't make it that long. And, we used American antique furniture, but we had to use some reproductions because of how fragile some of the things are. For instance, we had a set of Windsor chairs, and we found that a deal of someone who was making them, who was copying them. And they have these young children, and so we had them made. And, Windsor chairs are originally from England, but they very much have a history with America. And we wanted the house to have a balance of this feel with the young family and not be on a theme, but have a nod to where it was, a nod to that it was on the rocky coast of Maine and that this family had a history there. And so there were, real pieces such as end tables and, things with a beautiful patina that could stand up to these 5 children. And then, we did reproductions as well. And, we found beautiful quilts. And so you walked into the house and you didn't feel that you were walking into a house that, felt of a certain time, but it had these nods and these subtle things. And it really ended up working so beautifully for the family. And, some of these things that just had this patina just got more patina and really worked out wonderfully.
And the fact that they helped tell the story of Maine and where the house is, I think that's one of the things that when I first started at Veranda is that we realized we all had this shared value of when homes come in and we're deciding what goes in our 6 issues, it's like sense of place, and then also sense of place,
Yeah, sense of place is so important. You go into a project and you say to a client, well, this is where you live. And, and you also say, how do you use the home? and what is important to you. And Maine was very important to them. Their family had been there from the beginning. You know, they were the founders of this area. And so we wanted to connect to that history, but make it work for them in their modern lifestyle.
And in terms of this kind of broad, way more colorful and interesting idea of what we're talking about here, Stephen, you collect paintings. One of your collections is paintings by American artists of European scenes. And I thought that was a great example of pieces being defined by their story rather than by a very static definition. Talk a little bit about what draws you to those and what some of those stories are.
So in particular, that paintings collection was based on that painting that you mentioned earlier. It's sort of the first one. And a lot of these paintings happen to be grand tour scenes, so they happen to have architecture in them. So you see classical ruins in the background, so it's got a building upon the architect theme. So at this point, I have quite a number of those.
They're American, they were over there during the grand
painted
tour.
by Americans.
Yes.
Some of them own sites. Some of them are completely fictional scenes as well. Some of them are completely made up fantasies, which makes for some really great architecture. So beautiful scenery. And
so do you continue to kind of seek out these things that interest you in terms of that? Because that's a story, like that tells me a little bit more about your sort of storytelling interest as well.
yes, and in particular, just on a totally different note, another piece in the collection that has a great story behind it. Last year around this time, a dealer who's in the room today had a tall case clock that came from Delaware, and it actually has a label on it. So we know who made it. It's labeled by the McDowell brothers, and we know where they were based in Duck Creek, Delaware. We know that they trained with John Janvier in Odessa, Delaware, and Janvier trained in Philadelphia. So it's a very high style clock, and it's just a spectacular piece. And talk about storytelling. It's really wonderful to have a piece where you know where it came from, who made it, what town it came from. It's really spectacular. So storytelling around pieces can be really quite
Yeah, I feel like you weren't going to not walk out with that, you know. Frank, one thing that I was interested in that you had said earlier is that, or last time we talked, is that, you know, we know where American antiques, we know their role around us, but when you look at the global market, how do they view American antiques? What's its role?
There really isn't one. Americans buy American antiques, and it's been that way for a long time. There are some exceptions, but it's very much the exception, not the rule. It is not an international purchasing, today purchasing group, which is fine. I mean, it's nice to keep things here. We don't have to worry like the French do or the English.
No, I was excited to hear it. So
They're great things. It also makes it easier as a dealer looking for things. You very rarely, with a couple of exceptions, have to fly out of the country to see things.
yeah. Joe, have you been seeing any signals that might be changing in terms of interest?
Well, I agree with Frank that most of the preeminent collections of American furniture are here in this country. One important thing to keep in mind is that when you think of how much American furniture exists from the earliest days of our nation, it's very small volume of material compared to, for example, English furniture of the 18th century. There was just not as much made here. And so it is, I think there's less of it. And I think Americans, I think of, Horace Walpole being, one of the first who really started to appreciate the things that were made in his own country, his own cultural heritage. And I think that's perhaps why Americans have gravitated to this material more than others in the global community. You mentioned earlier that I'm involved with the Terra Foundation for American Art. We spent really the last 25 years promoting American art globally. I mean, for the longest time, very few international collections of American art, very few international collections of art included American paintings. And so it's really just been in the last several years that people are really starting to appreciate it, and that it has really become an important part of the international art scene. So I do think things are changing, just taking a little while.
I think that's intriguing. Elizabeth, what do you see in terms of, does anything stand out as notable among your clients that you're seeing as maybe an uptick or in terms of their interest in?
Well, I have a lot of young clients and they're interested in antiques. Everyone keeps wanting to say they're dead, no one loves brown furniture, but they do. They love it. A lot of them have grown up around it. Their parents, their grandparents had it. And so they want some of that. Now, they may not want the full house to be that way, but they have appreciation for it. They're sending me pictures on Instagram. They're sending me things from Pinterest and saying, oh my goodness, look at this collection, or I love this table. And so they understand it. They don't want what their friends have. They, don't want their house to look like what their friends looks like. And they have modern art. They're mixing modern art with these things. And they want to learn about it. And it's this whole thing that we're talking about, storytelling. They love a story behind it, whether it's, oh, this is a table from my grandmother, or I bought this, with a friend, and this is, what the dealer told me. They love to talk about it. And I think that's also why, the Winter Show has done such a great thing with the Young Collectors Night. And people come and the dealers are there to talk to them and teach them, and they love it. They want to know more. And I'm really seeing that. And that's exciting for me because I grew up loving these things, and it's nice, you hear all this, oh, it's all dead, and, they're not using it. But they do. They might mix it with something modern, but it's really great. It's still there.
And they want something that, they want their house to be original, right? And
exactly.
There's a lot of ways to make your house the same.
Exactly. And there's
a lot of ways.
And they see that. And they see that with what their friends are doing, and they'll say, I don't want this. And they'll, so it's great.
Stephen, what do you see? Is there sort of a change in accessibility to antiques, or what are you seeing out there? You're like Elizabeth, you're in a lot of these houses too, very well-heeled clients. What are you seeing?
I would say there's a lot on the market. There's a lot available. I don't know that that's terribly different from the way it has been for a while, but there is a lot out there right now if you're looking for something in particular. I will say that seasoned collectors that I know, that I call friends, tell me frequently that they think I'm incredibly lucky to be starting a collection right now. I'm not entirely sure what that means yet, but I hear it all the time. So it is an exciting time. I will say there's also quite a bit of scholarship out there right now, and lots of things that have been learned, new attributions, even the clock that I mentioned just a few minutes ago. The same dealer came across a chest that seems to be from the same region, from the same Janvier school, and reached out to me and said, I have another piece that might fit in with your clock. And it's super exciting to find these things.
And you said?
Of course. Of course. Yes, please.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's an exciting time.
It sounds like it. And Frank, from a price standpoint, any talk, you had kind of a shift since maybe 2008. What are you seeing?
Yes, I'm seeing a lot of opportunities. I think that's what everybody's saying, that there is an opportunity to put together an incredible collection for less than you might have had to do before 2008. I mean, there was, as a friend of mine says, that's when the music stopped, was 2008. And that was that first, the Great Recession. It's taken a long time to get back. Having said that, though, I mean, we are seeing new collectors, younger collectors, who are in the market. And this is a chance that you probably won't have again in your lifetime. I had one collector come in the other day, this was in the gallery, and he's buying a small apartment in Boston. He wants to fill it with federal furniture. And he can probably, not that $100,000 isn't a lot of money, but on $100,000, buy things that are museum-type objects from the major makers of the federal period, the Seymours, the whole group. And he can do it for $100,000 for a one-bedroom apartment and have a really remarkable collection. So, yes, the prices are down, but instead of seeing it as, oh, it's over or it's done, this is the chance to get in. And then, everybody used to come in and say, oh, I wish I had bought this in 1930, or, well, this is your 1930. Here's your chance.
Well, also, hats off to Helen. We're, this is Americana is now, and he's just affirmed that, but for sure. Joe, in terms of, is there a greater reach geographically? Do you see a change in, kind of the interest trickling down out of maybe the more traditional just Northeast?
Yeah, I think that I think the biggest challenge in the field of American art in general, so I'm talking not just about antiques, furniture, decorative arts, but American art in general, one of the biggest challenges is thinking through and redefining what American art is, what it means, expanding the narratives, expanding the stories that we tell. And I think that as we do that, it becomes attractive to greater and greater audiences. Examples that I would cite would be this incredible interest that has emerged in recent years in African American made pottery, to name just one area. The Metropolitan Museum of Art here in New York and the MFA in Boston did an incredible exhibition called Hear Me Now, which featured the pottery that was made by some enslaved and some newly freed African Americans in the Edgefield district of South Carolina. And that's an area where the prices are probably growing, not diminishing. But to me, it represents, a whole new focus. There's this incredible exhibition on right now at the American Folk Art Museum called Unnamed Figures. Many of you may have seen the amazing reviews that it got in the New York Times. And it tells it tells the story of the presence and the absence of African Americans in our sort of narrative artistic history. And by the way, that show is coming to historic Deerfield next, so you have a reason to come to beautiful, bucolic Western Massachusetts and see it if you aren't able to see it here. But it's focus on areas like that I think are really expanding our audiences and engaging younger generations and helping everyone, no matter your background, no matter where you come from, what viewpoints you hold, but helping you to understand why art and why American art in particular is relevant to you in your life.
That's a great point, and it kind of reminds me of, as the expansion of it, sometimes that starts with a really great find, like we've talked about, or and that's why I think so often the idea of joy in collecting, and it's this idea of something that you can get really passionate about and you can really dig into. And so I want to make sure I get this question in because I don't know quite where we are on time, but I did want to ask, each of you, a great find can be in the quality of something, the rarity of something, or, an unusual place you found something. So I'd love to hear from each of you, starting with you, Elizabeth. You found something maybe in an unusual place?
Yes, so in the house in Maine I was talking about, it was near Winslow Homer's studio, and in the attic there was a beam that he had painted with a quote, and it was beautiful and kind of amazing to find as, we were doing some construction on the older part of the house. And so with the client, we decided to take it out and put it in the entry when you come in for everyone to experience. And that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was just kind of...
No one knew it was there. Yeah. And I guess he had been, in the area and come over and been painting in the attic.
That's a find.
Yes.
Stephen, what about you?
So, I guess a little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I found something that came up at auction that's kind of a novelty piece. At first, I thought it was quite bizarre. It's a Eglamisé, Chinese export Eglamisé, so it's reverse painted glass, and it is the apotheosis of George Washington. And it's great to pull out at parties when you find someone who probably is not necessarily thinking they're interested in antiques or want to talk about it. And you can pull up the photo, and everyone kind of gets a kick out of seeing George Washington rising from the tomb and ascending to the heavens. So it's a great novelty piece. It's beautiful and quite rare. There are only a handful. There's one of the Peabody Essex in the collection. There's one in the Winterthur collection. I believe a few in private hands, and it's an amazing survival. It's a very delicate object, and it's in spectacular condition.
Is this something, though, that you started finding out about after you found that one, or did you already kind of? Because I've never heard of any. I mean, I wouldn't have known to like go looking for it.
We spend a lot of time at Mount Vernon. The curator, there's a close friend of ours. So,
spend a lot of time at Mount Vernon.
I have a lot of George Washington, Mount Vernon related items. So I have alerts set up for things. And it came up. I definitely had no idea that this particular thing existed until seeing it. And I thought it was very creepy, but also pretty fabulous.
Turns out creepy and fabulous can be the same
Exactly.
piece.
Yes.
Frank, what about you?
This is hard because they're all great finds, especially if you're buying it. It's a great find. This is a little bit of a story. It's a little bit of a journey. This happened about 30 years ago. A dealer actually on the floor now, Barton Levy, came in and had a picture of in an auction catalog in France of a desk. He said, "I think it's American." And I looked at it, and it's a black front desk with a little bit of inlay on the lid. And I said, "Yeah, I think it's American too." The sale, he came in on a Thursday, the sale was on a Saturday. I thought it was going to fly on the Concorde. That's how long ago it was. I didn't. I flew out on United, and I brought my wife because it was in France, and she speaks French, and I don't. And I remember going to the Hotel Drouot, which is where the auction was, and seeing the desk, and it was marvelous. I mean, you just looked at it, and it was incredible. Great inlay. You open up the lid. It's an incredible interior. It fit into a group that I knew. I didn't know the name of the maker, but it was an incredible group, including the so-called Quincy desk and bookcase at Winterthur as part of the group. And I'm thinking, oh, God, nobody here knows me. And as I'm walking out, somebody says, "Leaving?" And in the worst French accent, I said, "No." And run out. You have to come back about 2 hours later. The bidding starts. It's, trying to figure out my French numbers. And it goes to about 10,000 francs. And then it stops. I guess I should have said that part. But it incredibly excited. I get it. And then I have to convince the guy that I'm okay and all that. The desk is then shipped back to us in New York. And my grandfather said the day before it comes in, he says, "I had a dream last night that it's signed."
That it what?
It's signed. It is signed by its maker. So we get it, and we start opening up the secret compartments, and it was signed. It was signed by Richard Walker, dated 1739. Joe, you may actually know the desk. And that led to a whole article, and we now know the maker of an entire group of furniture. It was one of the most fun and most sort of spine-tingly moments.
For sure, for all of us, I think, because I got chills when you said that. That's exciting. Joe, what do you think?
Well, let me just say, I love the hunt. I think the hunt is so much fun, and it can be educational as well. And I remember reading about some archaeology that took place at a very special historic site called Drayton Hall, which is the greatest Palladian house of the 18th century in America. It's just outside Charleston. And they were doing archaeology on the site, and they found some very small fragments of a broken teapot. And by the way, these are called shards, in case anyone doesn't know that term. And the shards were, they basically were black Delft, made in Holland in the earliest years of the 18th century, and then they were decorated with polychrome decoration. And this was incredibly sophisticated material that was present in America at that really early date, probably 1705, 1710. So I knew of this, and for 15 years, I would talk to every dealer I could talk to and ask if they knew of any black Delft material that related or corresponded to these fragments that were found in South Carolina. And most of them would laugh at me because for anybody who doesn't know, black Delft is really rare. It was very hard to make because the black glaze was very temperamental, and if you heated it too hot, it turned brown. If you did it too cool, it would be green. So there were only 2 potteries in Delft that were able to make it. And today, in the entire world, there are only about 55 objects that exist. So the dealers would kind of chuckle when I would ask about this. Well, a few years ago, I was vacationing in Amsterdam, and I went to a preeminent dealer who happens to be at the winter show, Aronson's Antiquaires, 8 generations of dealers in Delftware. And I said, they offered me some beautiful things, but I said, what I really want is this black Delft teapot. And I said, I only know of one, and it's in the Rijksmuseum. And I showed the picture to him. And, he too sort of said, well, I respect your interest in that, but that's a pretty rare thing. So I continued the rest of my vacation, and the night before I was to leave, I got a phone call from this dealer, and he said, I'd like to meet with you tomorrow. I have something really important to talk to you about. And he came to my hotel, and he showed me photographs of a second black Delft teapot that had the same polychrome decoration that matched these shards that had been excavated. And I asked him about it. He said it is in the collection of a very elderly collector in Brussels, but he might be willing to sell it. And so I expressed interest in it. And a few weeks later, it was January, I was here in New York for Americana Week and met with the dealer, and I brought, I had the museum at Drayton Hall bring those shards up. The dealer wasn't able to bring the teapot with him because it needed an export license. And so he didn't have enough time to do that. But we brought a ceramic artist who was able to match the brush strokes and confirm that the same artist who had decorated these broken pieces had decorated the intact object. And then we used an archaeologist's circumference device to confirm that the size of the intact teapot was the same as the one that these shards related to. And so I made arrangements for the dealer. The winter show ended, the dealer went back to Amsterdam, and about a month later, we all met in Charleston. He brought the teapot, and we were able to actually compare it to these shards. And it was so exciting because as we looked at all of it together, we determined that it was probably made by the very same artist, maybe even close in time, and I ended up acquiring the piece. And it's it's one of 55 objects of Black Delft. And the reason it's so sophisticated is the Black Delft was meant to replicate Chinese lacquerware that was very popular but exceedingly expensive at the time. And the reason that it made its way from Holland to colonial South Carolina was because the man who owned it was named Francis Young, and Francis Young was the colonial agent for South Carolina from about 1710 until 1726. And he was making frequent trips to London to report on the colonies. And so we believe it's likely that he purchased it there and brought it back. But the reason I love it is an example of one of the most sophisticated ceramic objects to exist in America in that very early period. And as I say, I love the story of looking for it for all those years and then finally coming across something and being able to confirm its authenticity and all of that. And I think, I see so many collectors in the audience. I think probably everybody enjoys the hunt because it is the stories like that make these pieces so special.
That brings us full circle, because that story, as you were talking about that, I was thinking, is it the writer in me? But I can see creating historical fiction over some sort of pursuit of that exact thing. And so I think we have a movie here, maybe, I don't know. That's fascinating. And also we were talking about Charleston earlier, and so hearing about Drayton Hall, and yeah, I've got this story all in my head. I know exactly how this will go, and maybe who will star in it, I don't know. I think we have time for maybe one more quick question, and I just wanted to say, if you had any brief advice for anyone in collecting right now, and what is, in terms of American antiques, it might be a category that you think is especially hot, it might be something that really excites you, just maybe in a few words, if you would each go through it. Joe, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, I would say now is a great time to be looking for Americana, because there is a really good marketplace for buyers right now. And the other advice that I would give is I use a lot of experts. I have an advisor who helps me with furniture, and two advisors who help me with ceramics, another for textiles, another for base metalwares. I feel like I learned so much by working with experts. And the last thing I would say is I have never, ever, when I look back on my collecting history, ever regretted paying too much for something really special. If I've ever had any regrets, it's buying something that's a little bit more ordinary. So I encourage you to seek out the very finest and rarest things, because those are the really special things that also, I think, tend to hold their value more. So that's it from me.
Yeah, Elizabeth?
I would say that, yes, there's a lot of opportunity now, and to look at the auctions, and it is the thrill of the hunt, and ask the questions, talk to the dealers, and figure out what you really love if you're just starting to collect, and, go after that, and just keep talking to people, find out the stories.
Stephen?
I would echo what Elizabeth just said there. To a young person who's interested, go to museums, meet with curators, go to auction houses, meet with the experts there, go visit dealers, go visit private collections. There's so many people who have so much knowledge that they love to share. So take the opportunity, spend time with them. Just this past year, I actually took my office down to Winterthur, and we did a private study tour for a day, and then we went to Historic Odessa and the same thing the following day. And it's spectacular to expose people to that, and the people at the institutions were so excited to have us there, and we were so excited to be there. So take people up on the opportunities.
It's both ways.
Yes,
They're
exactly.
excited to talk about it, so don't be afraid to ask and go seek it out. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Frank?
I hate to go last because I think everybody said the right things. The only thing I'd add is buy what you love, collect what you love, and don't necessarily do it for the financial reward down the road, because it may or may not be there. Buy the things that make you happy, bring joy, for whatever reason, whether it's beautiful, whether it's historically important. Those are usually the best collectors, and those are usually the best collections.
I just feel like we're all very lucky right now to be able to hear all of this from you, and to kind of have this time with you to hear about your experiences and this wonderful advice that you can give us. Any questions before we wrap it up? Yes, right back here.
My question is related to the house. How did the house get from Deerfield, Massachusetts to
Okay, so I was not personally involved in that endeavor, but the family that moved the house, it's a great story. They were old house enthusiasts, and they found this house that was built around 1740, It had never had plumbing or electricity because another house was built on the property. And they originally planned to move it about 3 miles. So they carefully disassembled it. It was on about 2,000 acres of wooded property deep in a forest. And they basically took the house apart. All of the timbers, of course, were numbered. It was a timber frame house. And they moved the timbers, and they moved the center chimney that rises up through the middle of the house on 2 semis, and they were going to rebuild it about 3 miles away, but the man who was an engineer was relocated for his work to Milwaukee, and so they brought the house with them. And they found a sympathetic spot and reconstructed it. And there are other houses that have been moved, not necessarily that far, but it is possible.
Great question. Anyone else? I just want to thank you all for spending your time here with us, and hope you've really enjoyed the show and enjoy it for the next week or so. And thank you to all of our panelists. You all have been wonderful, and we're so lucky to hear from you. Thank you so much.